This week on the agenda, a country in crisis. What next for France following the collapse of Michel Barnier's government after just 3 months in power? France has been left in a political and economic crisis following the fall of Michel Barnier's government. Barnier became the first French Prime Minister to lose a no-confidence vote in more than 60 years after attempting and failing to push his controversial budget through their National Assembly without a vote. So where does this leave France, its economy and its role in the EU? Joining me now are Jacques Reland, Senior Research Fellow at the Global Policy Institute, Dr. Renaud Foucart, Senior Lecturer at Lancaster University, and Paul Smith, Associate Professor in French History and Politics at the University of Nottingham. Great to see all of you here. Now, Jacques, let me start with you, and let's just recap, talk about what's been happening, because President Macron called that snap election for July. Over the summer, there was no overall majority. It took him ages to pick a prime minister. Why do you think Macron thought that Michel Barnier was the one who could calm this political storm?
He thought that Barnier was the right man at the right time in the right place because he's the man who could bring together a government backed by the center-right, by the central bloc, as we know it, with center-right, the ex-Macronists and so on, who totaled around 180 votes, and get the backing also of the National Front. And that's what Barnier tried to do. He did not open up to the left, he only opened up to the right. The Barnier government was actually a strange government where the most of the important ministers came from the party which had the least votes in the elections. And the Républicains, who only had about 45 MPs. And therefore, it certainly shifted to the right and did not pay any regard, or at least tried maybe to get some center-left politicians in the government to increase its backing, and instead, but the left refused to play ball with Barnier. The left, the center, the socialists decided not to break their alliance with the LFI, the Mélenchon supporter, which is what Macron was hoping when he called for the election. Marine Le Pen wants a quick election because she fears that she might not be eligible following sentencing over illegal funding in European. So she decided, instead of being respectable, proving that she can manage the country, contribute to managing the country with the center-right and the Macronists, instead decided to oppose, because actually Marine Le Pen was not too bothered about Barnier. What she wants to is to attack Macron and create a crisis which would lead to Macron resigning, and which is the view also of Mélenchon LFI, hoping that both together the chaos would lead to the resignation of Macron, which is not on the cards in my opinion.
So we have a political crisis, chaos, as you put it. There's no budget. I'm wondering, Renaud, if this could all have been avoided if Macron had maybe made a different pick, or maybe if he hadn't taken that risk, called that risky snap election in the first place.
I think the snap election in the mind of Macron was unavoidable to clarify things. It was clearly completely risky, but in a way, everything was on track for him. As Jacques said, this is really an unexpected judiciary outcome for Marine Le Pen. It was not in anybody's mind at the time that she would need so urgently to be in the opposition to avoid taking responsibility. So, of course, Macron has been I think, making a big mistake in only talking to the far right, because normally if you're the center of gravity in any parliamentary democracy without a clear majority, you need to talk to the left and to the right, and then try to make deals and bargain. Here, Marine Le Pen was in position to ask for everything she wanted. She got everything, and she got all the good news to announce. So she could go to her voters and say, oh, thanks to me, we've protected the price of medicines. Thanks to me, we've protected the pensioners, etc. But this can only go for a certain time, because at some point, Barnier's job was to bring the budget back on track. And even the kind of budget agreement there was until the censorship of the government was not exactly the kind of ambition they had at the beginning, because there are a lot of categories that are now untouchable in France, namely in first place the pensioners. So the last hurdle, the official reason why Marine Le Pen censored Barnier, is the freezing of the highest pension. So we're talking about the 50% wealthiest pensioners, and even those people, her as standard populist, did not feel strong enough to accept that we would cut on their spending. So to bring France back on track for budget, that was a tough job.
Yeah, but with no budget, a lot of people are going to be in for a shock, because some of those benefits are going to be hit by inflation, and they're going to be more out of pocket than Marine is claiming that they're going to be. Paul, I wonder, were there any other options here, for Michel Barnier? Because I feel there were. Such a seasoned politician took such a risky strategy over a budget by using these special constitutional measures rather than putting it to a vote.
Well, I think Barnier's problem was that he wasn't prepared to negotiate with the left. To go back to something that Renaud was saying earlier, is that Macron called the snap election for several reasons. One of them was to try to split. He looked at the results of the European elections and thought he could split the socialists. He's really trying to reinvent Macron in 2017. That's what's going on. Trying to spread to go from the moderate left to the moderate right. I'm talking about back in June. That failed. What he didn't count on was the success, the relative success of the new Popular Front. Then he appoints Barnier. It's not really in Barnier's nature. He is on the right. He's not on the furthest right of the right, but he's pretty staunchly a right-wing politician. He's not in his nature really to try to negotiate with the left, and he's failed to do that all the way down the line. And so he's kind of he went for 49-3 because that's the only way probably that he was going to get it through, and hope to survive a censure motion and leave the responsibility with Le Pen. But he seriously underestimated Le Pen's desire for chaos. And this comes back to what both Jacques and Renaud have said, that she's decided to push the chaos button to align herself to some degree with Mélenchon and really go for Macron. Because of course what this does by removing Barnier is it brings Macron, by appointing Barnier, Macron is able to sit back. By removing Barnier, getting rid of Barnier, Le Pen is able to tackle head-on Macron. It brings him back into the focus, and that's what this is really all about. But also, Barnier was not a man who was really going to be capable of negotiating with the left, and indeed even the moderate left, not particularly. At that time or at this moment, they might change in due course, but at this time they're not willing to negotiate either. They have, politics. Sometimes in politics, time is important, and there have been moments where it's just not been possible. It might be in due course, but we don't know that yet.
But while this power grab is going on, there is a serious economic issue here. This huge black hole. I mean, Jacques, how much of a mess is Europe's second largest economy in? I mean, after all, I think borrowing costs are now higher than they are in Greece.
Yes, I know. It's a bad fiscal situation. We'll have a 6%. France will have a 6% deficit of the GDP this year. And the idea with the Barnier, the aim was to bring it down to 5% next year. And it was agreed with the European Commission. The trajectory of public finances was agreed with the Commission. So, and also, part of that was included that there would not be any challenge to the pensions reform, which was one of the stumbling blocks for the left joining. The pensions reform is crucial to steady improvement of French public finances. So now we're in a situation where the fiscal situation is bad, but let's not exaggerate it. Basically, the extra interest rates which will be levied, which France will have to pay, the spread with Germany is less than 1% and actually has been decreasing recently and will present an increase of maybe it will be an extra 20 billion euros for the public budget next year, which would put the reimbursement of the debt at a budget higher than the defense budget and close to the education budget, which is the biggest budget in France. But at the same time, France is not in a situation for Greece over 10 years ago. France has private savings, which are much higher than the French state debt, twice as high as the French public debt. And France has an amazingly efficient tax system. So the markets are not worried about France collapsing, becoming bankrupt. What worries me more is not so much the fiscal situation as the economic situation. We can see now that unemployment, which had been going down, which was one of the great successes of Macron's presidency, unemployment was no longer a topic in a political debate. Now unemployment is going back up more and more. And the main problem is that France's main trading partner, Germany, is in even a worse economic situation. So the big problem is we can see that the clouds are gathering and unemployment will go up, there will be more miscontent, and the situation in Europe will be particularly bad. The two engines of European construction, France and Germany, are facing big economic problems. And when these two countries sneeze, the rest of Europe catches a cold. And we will see, for example, countries like Italy depend on Germany subcontracting, countries in Central Europe. So it is a time where the worry for me is more economic than financial, and obviously economic at a time when America is booming, when Europe is the target of attacks from Putin and Trump. Having two countries with no stable government and a deteriorating economic situation puts Europe in a bad place.
Well, Renaud, Barnier's solution was this dramatic budget with draconian spending cuts and tax hikes. Not a vote winner, but on the other hand, something needs to be done to get the public finances right. You know, isn't Barnier's fall then bad for a fragile French economy? And I'm just wondering, you know, if there's any chance that his successor is going to be able to do anything about it anyway.
It's very hard because everyone is dealing with a structural problem that happened during the first term of Macron and which led to the yellow jacket. Is that Macron started the process of, he was the big reformer who would unleash private creativity and lower the size of the state. He started to do that by lowering the tax. But at the same time, some tax, some tax on property, some tax on work, on business. But at the same time, he didn't cut spending and he didn't increase the other tax he was planning to increase. So the yellow jacket was a revolt against environmental taxation. So the idea of decreasing tax on business and taxing pollution is a very mainstream economic idea. Everyone was very enthusiastic at this version of Macron. But he didn't go through. He canceled the tax hike, and now we're stuck with this structural deficit where you need to make a choice. Either you bring back the taxes at the level they were before, which were the kind of level that were making a lot of people angry in France, or you move back on environmental taxation. But Macron has moved a bit from being the great reformer to being the kind of old-fashioned French politician who prefer to talk about, security, secularism, and not talk too much about dynamism. And there is no alternative solution except for cutting something else. And so Barnier was trying to go for a little bit of everything, but we've talked about that. It didn't go well with pensions. Cutting spending is always a nice right-wing idea in theory, but when you want to do it in practice, vested interests are very strong. You have people in the street, so it's a tough job for someone. And it would take, the figure of Barnier was this very old politician, was not seeking himself election, so he could talk to the far right, etc. That's nice for a few years, but you need someone who comes up with a way to break this structural problem, which is the big 4% deficit on top of what is acceptable.
Paul, I wonder what the implications are here for Emmanuel Macron. I mean, certainly in the debate, the oppositions are Le Pen, Mélenchon, they didn't hold back. But a recent poll showed that 2/3 of the country, so regular folk, think that Macron should resign if Barnier faced a vote of no confidence, which has happened. So should he?
No. Not to put too fine a point on it, can we imagine a situation where Macron announces this evening, when he speaks to the French people, that he would say, I'm resigning, and then throws us into even more chaos? There's a time delay on a presidential election, so we'd be talking about an election in January, were he to resign. And I don't think that's, it's one thing for people to say, yes, we think he should go, but actually to think through the consequences of a change of president and exactly who thinks they would benefit from that? Well, Mélenchon and Le Pen. And then the French people, when they think about that as the alternative, is that really what they want to be doing, choosing between those two extremes? The problem is that the centre has no alternative to Macron. And I think that he knows that and they know that. And at this moment, there is no political figure from the right, not a Laurent Wauquiez, nobody else, who could emerge as having the credibility as an alternative. So, we might hope that there's some kind of candidate who might emerge over what would be a very short campaign. It is limited by the Constitution as to how long that campaign would last. They wouldn't have the time to come over as being credible. So I think that is, everybody who is talking to Macron, who isn't Le Pen or isn't Mélenchon, certainly not be suggesting that he should resign. And certainly Macron is not making any signs that he is planning to do that.
I totally agree that Macron will not want to resign. And that's not what the traditional parties of government, such as the Socialists and the Republicans, want. They're absolutely not ready. The only two parties ready for a presidential election is, as Paul said, and willing are the LFI, the Mélenchon supporters, and the National Rally, who want a quick election because now they think they still have a chance. But there's no way that the Socialist Party is ready for a presidential election now. Yeah. They need to agree on a vision, on a program. They need to regroup. 3 years it's quite a short time for them to do that, because, and it's the same for the Republicans. These two parties who for a long time dominated French politics fell to around 10% of the vote, while they used to represent over 2/3 of the vote in France before. So they need to regroup, and for that, they need to take part in a government, that's in the government of national unions.
Let's pause there for a moment, gentlemen, but do stay with us. As still to come here on the agenda, what impact will this domestic crisis have on France's role on the international stage?
We are all connected. Across borders, across continents, connected by ideas, a shared humanity. Stay connected.
Welcome back to the agenda. And let's continue now with our discussion of the growing political crisis in France in the wake of the collapse of Michel Barnier's government. Still with me are Jacques Reland, Senior Research Fellow at the Global Policy Institute, Dr. Renaud Foucart, Senior Lecturer at Lancaster University, and Paul Smith, Associate Professor in French History and Politics at the University of Nottingham. Renaud, what impact do you think this could have for France on the international stage? Because while there was high drama at the Assemblée Nationale, Macron was in Saudi Arabia signing strategic partnership and pledging to de-escalate the conflict in the Middle East. So to what extent has all of this maybe weakened France internationally?
I'm not sure it will weaken France because, in a way, when Macron is in the international stage, he's living his best life. If you remember the promises of Macron 2017 about the French economy, he didn't deliver a lot. But if you think about Macron as a European character, as an international character, he has been a major figure. He has been a major figure in further European integration. He has been the kind of person who is able to talk to Donald Trump and give him the kind of shiny things he wants. You know, he was invited to the grand reopening of Notre Dame. That's the kind of gold-plated thing that Macron can think about. He's a very clever international operator. He's been a major figure on the Middle East war at the moment and in the fragile truce in Lebanon. So I think for Macron on the international stage, it's not really a big issue. The only international problem is really the economy and whether France still finds its place in the global economy.
Well, Jacques, Barnier's catchphrase, of course, throughout the Brexit negotiations was "the clock is ticking." Well, his time is up. But how much grace do you think France has now to get its house in order? I mean, will the EU cut them some slack, or do you think there are big implications for Europe if France can't meet its financial obligations?
Yes, I mean, if France is... I mean, the financial obligations, if you mean if there is financial chaos in France, which I don't think there will be, but I think that France's position is weakened. Macron, yes, the thing that everyone agreed about Macron is the one who had the proper vision for Europe with autonomic strategy, and that especially in these difficult times, Macron had the right vision and the right solution for Europe, which is an opinion that I have to share by many. And that was the strong point of Macron, is European policy, is European vision. Obviously, since he's lost influence, obviously, since the snap election and the fact that he has a very difficult domestic situation. So, and while at the same time, you see that in Europe, the movement which are anti-Europeans, such as Meloni, Orban, and you can see what happened in Romania and Slovakia, the anti-European forces are gathering strength. And therefore, and Macron is no longer in a position to be the undisputed leader of a European renewal and and especially at the moment when Europe is under threat from both America and Russia. So therefore, I think he's been weakened by the domestic situation.
Renaud, what do you think? Is that how you see the EU dealing with this?
Well, in the end, there is not a lot of alternative for someone who provides a bold vision. So you can say what you want about Orban and Meloni being strong, but Meloni, as the far-right leader of Italy, one of the first things she did was to show her European credential and to follow the kind of lead that Macron gave in the first place. So Jacques mentioned strategic autonomy. This was really something visionary before the war in Ukraine, mostly in the context of having to be independent both from the US and from China. And those kind of things are not provided by nationalists, because nationalists, by definition, they pray for their own chapel. They are not interested in any big, bold European movement. So the nationalists won on one thing, they won on the border. So everyone is kind of far right now in Europe when you think about migration. Everyone is talking about processing people abroad, etc. But for the rest, for an economic vision for Europe, I think, first of all, the footprint of Macron will remain. And second, there is a big advantage of being there for a long time. So when you go to a council, a European council, Macron is one of the few figures who is still there. He was there for Trump #1. You know, there is no more Merkel, even Scholz is going. All those people have been going back and forth, and he's this living memory of European Council who still has some broad recognition on the international stage. So I'm totally not thinking that he's that weak in the international stage, no.
No.
So, Paul, you know, with the ballooning debt crisis and with what seems like irrevocable differences in French politics, and you could say that Barnier's mission was impossible. Now they haven't got a budget for 2025, and things are just going to have to limp on until the constitution allows for another election, as earliest, I think, is next July. So what happens next?
There are a couple of possibilities, essentially. There may well be the possibility of finding somebody who could become a political prime minister, as it were, to reorientate, to reorganize a coalition. And it may be that this is one of those sort of, shaking some sense into people moments that might, I know that within Macron's own followers, there's the idea of trying to reach out for, trying to split. We come back to something that I think all of us have alluded to, this idea of trying to persuade the moderate left into some kind of coalition. And it's interesting that we've heard from Laurent Wauquiez, the leader of Les Républicains, that his party would not seek a censure motion in the life of this existing National Assembly of any government. So that kind of removes some kind of doubt on the position on the right. Or we go for a technical government which simply manages. Essentially, it would be a government that can't take any initiatives. It would simply manage the economy. It would make do with the budget as it existed for 2024. There are rules, there are laws in place that kind of foresee this situation. France is not, it's in uncharted waters in the sense that we haven't been here before, but those charts do exist in the sense that there are various ways that this can go. So France isn't completely lost. And that would then, one can imagine, perhaps a technical government that could just about manage politics through until the election. It wouldn't be brilliant, but this is the situation where we find ourselves.
Jacques, lots of the commentary we're seeing is that this is very French, what is happening. What do the people of France feel about all of this? What do you think they're hoping for, and are they going to get it?
I think that they're dismayed by the situation, but they're hoping. One of the French fantasies is the government of national union, where all sensible for politicians from the center left to the center right work together for the common good. And funnily enough, the situation might bring that about, and it might bring about also a change, an end to the presidential nature of the Fifth Republic. Many people think that the Fifth Republic has run its course, that maybe we need new institutions. I don't think so. I think the Fifth Republic is very flexible. And we see that now we are back in a situation where the power, when the president has no majority in parliament, the power is in parliament. And it's something that could be a step forward for France, which would maybe lead to parties working together. France hasn't got the compromise culture. And maybe the situation would force parties which are always at loggerheads with each other and very violently so, to maybe work together towards a compromise program of government. And I think that's something that the French people would dream of, and which might, funnily enough, be in the offing if the situation anyway allows for that. We don't know. I was hoping that it would happen already after the last election in July. It did not happen. They stayed camped in their position, but I think there's been a shift, and I think that now we can see parties maybe ready to work together like they do in all other European countries, like they do in Germany, like they do, before the parties which are opposed to each other negotiate and agree on a common program of government. Everyone has to make concessions, but work in the national interest, and that's what the next government will have to show.
Jacques Reland, Renaud Foucart, Paul Smith, thank you all very much. You can watch every episode of The Agenda in full on CGTN Europe's YouTube channel. And for exclusive extra content from me, my guests and the rest of the team, don't forget to check out The Agenda Show on TikTok. Coming soon on The Agenda, the future of AI. We'll get the very latest from this year's Web Summit in Lisbon. But for now, from me, Juliet Mann, and from all of the Agenda team here in London, goodbye.